Welcome into the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name's Seth Warner, and on this podcast, we talk about Kentucky basketball from a fan's perspective. And on this episode, we're going to just talking about the offseason this year. Kentucky, it's getting that offseason time. The portal is 1 week away from opening. The Cats are getting in that groove. They're having team meetings, players meetings with players and coaches where they're making decisions on what's going to happen in the future and how all that's going to work. With the Cats last week being coaches and players individual meeting, no parents, no agents. And then this week being players, being agents and everyone talking with the coaches. And then next week's going to be the start of the portal cycle. We've already had one guy hit the portal in Jalen Lowe leaving. Was a guy that dealt with injuries all season, as we all know, did not play most of the year and just was not able to impact this Kentucky team at the level that Kentucky wanted or expected. And Kentucky just had to move on with Kentucky right now is just trying to figure out the price tags of all these guys and evaluating what their value is to Kentucky and what Kentucky's going to have to do to really show this roster and build this team out and go grab some big fish in the portal and in recruiting. And the guy that they're really in heavy pursuit right now is Tyron Stokes. Down to really reported Kansas and Kentucky are the two heavy teams. Bill Self potential retirement could change that. I read some stuff talking about that it could be down to Kentucky and Kansas, and if Bill Self retires, it could be Kentucky, and if he stays, it's probably going to be Kansas. But we'll just have to see as we go down the stretch. There were some rumors that he could potentially commit tomorrow at the McDonald's All-American game, but those have kind of calmed down and are most likely not going to happen for Mr. Tyron Stokes. But also for the Cats, Kentucky is just getting in roster building mode. Like I said, they're evaluating all their players, seeing who's worth what and where Kentucky could potentially fit. There were some rumors that Colin Chandler could potentially leave. Those rumors have kind of died down also, with some other reporting about him potentially having pinned a deal for him to return with his NIL and all that rev share for him to come back next season. Cam Williams, really haven't heard a whole lot about him, but it's a guy that Kentucky is very interested in bringing back for the Wildcats. But Kentucky just needs to figure out what guys value. It's going to be interesting to see Modi Abate, Andre Yelovich, Brandon Garrison, just where Kentucky ends up piecing this roster together and what their depth looks like. And in the next coming days, we'll see what these kind of evaluations look like between the coaches and the parents and these agents about what teams value and how they're valuing each other and what Kentucky's going to have to look like to going forward in this upcoming cycle, trying to get a couple commitments. As in this cycle, it's very different than the past 10 years. We're looking at more of a spring commitment cycle in a lot of these situations where a lot of these teams, these guys aren't committing till later in the cycle. With Tyron Stokes and the company looking at what the roster is going to look like as we get closer and closer to the portal officially opening. We've had a bunch of guys officially enter, some rumors. We'll see what that ends up happening for the Wildcats. But Kentucky, it's just going to be very important for them to build this roster out with structured barriers. To me, I've seen some Brandon Ramsey on Twitter. I read a lot of his stuff and talking about it. I'll be interested to see what this coaching staff really recruits and how they see this roster. Because personally, if you're going to start one of Colin Chandler or Cam Williams, I would be more on the Cam Williams train. I just think he's a much better defender and has some of that shooting upside with his size, length, and athleticism. And Kentucky, I think if you get another two and have Colin Chandler come off the bench, I think that would be very valuable. Tyron Stokes is the guy you want to go after with at that power forward position in my mind. my potential lineups would be it depend it depends on the ball handling, but you have a portal guard, potentially Colin Chandler, or another guy. I would want to bring in somebody to compete with Colin Chandler to really make those two dudes go at each other and really see who would be the best fit at Kentucky going forward. And then it'd be Cam Williams at the 3. It would be Tyron Stokes or / portal player at the 4. And then Malachi Moreno at the 5 would be my vague starting lineup for the Cats. And then bench pieces wise, kind of how I look at the retention is you kind of want to get one of Andre Yelovich, Modi Abate, or Brandon Garrison, probably leaning more towards those two forwards in Andre Yelovich or Modi Abate, just depending on what role those guys are looking at, more bench pieces personally. Braden Hawthorne is a guy that's kind of a wild card for this team, is going to really shake up, I think, a little bit of this rotation and see what Kentucky is going to do going forward for the Cats. We're going to have to see if he ends up being a legitimate rotation piece that I think he can be for the Cats with his length, size, athleticism at 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, length, athleticism, motor, has all the tools that the Cats look for as another elite defensive wing that can really do a lot of different things on the floor at 6'8" with elite mobility if he can finish putting on some real physicality. Kentucky also added four-star guard. Kentucky added four-star guard, son of Mo Williams. Mason Williams, a guy that's a very dynamic point guard, has had some very good performances, played prolific prep the other day, had a really good 24-point upset win, could be a potential backup point guard. We'll really see what Kentucky ends up doing in that spot at the backup point guard. Could potentially bring in another guard to show 3 guards in that lineup. But for the Cats, it's going to be very important for them to shore up that spot where Kentucky really struggled this past season. And also with Colin Chandler and his lack of ball handling at times, it's going to be very important for Kentucky to defend and to find legitimate ball handling. I think Tyron Stokes at the 3 or 4 can give you some of that going forward. But Kentucky, it's going to be important for our depth that was really tested this year with 2 major injuries. And it really showed, especially at those forward positions. I don't think either one of the 2 guys I talked about could be relied upon to be starting level centers in my mind. But overall, I think Kentucky just needs to keep on building on a couple different guys. I think you're wanting to go off a star point guard, star forward, and then Malachi, in my opinion, and kind of what I've seen, if he can shore up his hands, get a little better in the zoom. He got better as the year went on with those back cuts, those bounce passes. A good, not great shot blocker, but has some legitimate tools in his arsenal to defend at a high level. And he just needs to keep on building on that. I think he could be a potential all SEC, and maybe even if he takes that real leap with a lot of guys graduating, potential All-American, just as they always say, that freshman to sophomore leap is the biggest by far out of any of the years of college that guys progress and develop in their game. So overall,